Chapter 7 of The Cat of Bubastes, A Tale of Ancient Egypt. This recording is in the public domain. The Cat of Bubastes, by G. A. Henty. Chapter 7. Hippopotamus and Crocodile. Guided by Rabah, the party now descended to the edge of the swamp. Here in the shallow water lay 3 boats, or rather rafts, constructed of bundles of bulrushes. They were turned up in front so as to form a sort of swan-necked bow, and in outline were exactly similar to the iron of modern skates. Upon each stood a native with a pole for pushing the rafts along, and 3 or 4 spears. These were of unusual shape, and the lads examined them with curiosity. They had broad short blades, and these were loosely attached to the shafts, so that when the animal was struck the shaft would drop out, leaving the head embedded in its flesh. To the head was attached a cord which was wound up on a spindle passing through a handle. "Those rafts do not look as if they would carry 3," Chebron said. "They will do so at a push," the man replied, "but they are better with 2 only." "I will stop on shore with your permission, Chebron," Jethro said. "I see there are a number of men here with ropes. I suppose they have something to do with the business, and I will accompany them." "The ropes are for hauling the beasts ashore after we have struck them." "Well, I will go and help pull them. I can do my share at that, and should be of no use on one of those little rafts. Indeed, I think that my weight would bury it under the water." "We have been out this morning, my lord," the boatman said, addressing Chebron, "and have found out that there is a river horse lying in a pool a mile up the river. I think he is a large one, and will give us good sport." Chebron and Amuba now took their places on the 2 rafts, and the men, laying down the spears and taking the poles, pushed off from the shore. Noiselessly they made their way among the rushes. Sometimes the channels were so narrow that the reeds almost brushed the rafts on both sides. Then they opened out into wide pools, and here the water deepened so much that the poles could scarce touch the bottom. Not a word was spoken, as the men had warned them that the slightest noise would scare the hippopotami and cause them to sink to the bottom of the pools, where they would be difficult to capture. After half an hour's poling they reached a pool larger than any they had hitherto passed, and extending on one side almost to the bank of the river. The man on his raft now signed to Chebron to take up one of the spears, but the lad shook his head and motioned him to undertake the attack, for he felt that, ignorant as he was of the habits of the animal, it would be folly for him to engage in such an adventure. The man nodded, for he had indeed been doubting as to the course which the affair would take, for it needed a thrust with a very powerful arm to drive the spear through the thick hide of the hippopotamus. Amuba imitated Chebron's example, preferring to be a spectator instead of an actor in this unknown sport. For 3 or 4 minutes the boats lay motionless. Then a blowing sound was heard, and the boatman pointed to what seemed to the boys 2 lumps of black mud projecting an inch or 2 above the water near the margin of the rushes. They could not have believed that these formed part of an animal, but that slight ripples widening out on the glassy water showed that there had been a movement on the spot indicated. With a noiseless push Chebron's hunter sent the boat in that direction, and then handed the end of the pole to Chebron, signing to him to push the boat back when he gave the signal. When within 10 yards of the 2 little black patches there was a sudden movement. They widened into an enormous head, and a huge beast rose to his feet, startled at the discovery he had just made that men were close at hand. In an instant the hunter hurled his spear with all his force. Tough as was the animal's hide, the sharp head cut its way through. With a roar the beast plunged into the rushes, the shaft of the spear falling out of its socket as it did so, and the strong cord ran out rapidly from the reel held by the hunter. Presently the strain ceased. "He has laid down again in shelter," the hunter said. "We will now follow him and give him a second spear." Pushing the rushes aside the boat was forced along until they again caught sight of the hippopotamus that was standing up to its belly in water. "Is he going to charge?" Chebron asked, grasping a spear. "No, there is little chance of that. Should he do so and upset the boat, throw yourself among the rushes and lie there with only your face above water. I will divert his attention and come back and get you into the boat when he has made off." Another spear was thrown with good effect. There was a roar and a great splash. Chebron thought that the animal was upon them, but he turned off and dashed back to the pool where he had been first lying. "I thought that was what he would do," the hunter said. "They always seek shelter in the bottom of the deep pools, and here, you see, the water is not deep enough to cover him." The boat again followed the hippopotamus. Amuba was still on his raft on the pool. "What has become of him?" Chebron asked as they passed beyond the rushes. "He has sunk to the bottom of the pool," Amuba replied. "He gave me a start, I can tell you. We heard him bursting through the rushes, and then he rushed out with his mouth open a mouth like a cavern and then, just as I thought he was going to charge us, he turned off and sank to the bottom of the pool." "How long will he lie there?" Chebron asked the hunter.
"A long time if he is left to himself, but we are going to stir him up."
So saying, he directed the boat toward the rushes nearest to the bank and pushed the boat through them. "Oh, here you are, Jethro!" Chebron said, seeing the Rebu and the men he had accompanied standing on the bank. "What has happened, Chebron? Have you killed one of them? We heard a sort of roar and a great splashing." "We have not killed him, but there are two spearheads sticking into him." The hunter handed the cords to the men and told them to pull steadily, but not hard enough to break the cords. Then he took from them the end of the rope they carried and pulled back into the pool. "Those cords are not strong enough to pull the great beast to the shore, are they?" Chebron asked.
"Oh, no, they would not move him; but by pulling on them it causes the spearheads to give him pain. He gets uneasy and rises to the surface in anger. Then, you see, I throw this noose over his head, and they can pull upon that." In 2 or 3 minutes the animal's head appeared above the water. The instant it did so the hunter threw the noose. The aim was correct, and with a jerk he tightened it round the neck. "Now pull!" he shouted. The peasants pulled, and gradually the hippopotamus was drawn toward the bank, although struggling to swim in the opposite direction. As soon, however, as he reached the shallow water and his feet touched the ground he threw his whole weight upon the rope. The peasants were thrown to the ground and the rope dragged through their fingers as the hippopotamus again made his way to the bottom of the pool. The peasants regained their feet and pulled on the rope and cords. Again the hippopotamus rose and was dragged to the shallow, only to break away again. For 8 or 10 times this happened. "He is getting tired now," the hunter said. "Next time or the time after they will get him on shore. We will land then and attack him with spears and arrows."
The hippopotamus was indeed exhausted, and allowed itself to be dragged ashore at the next effort without opposition. As soon as it did so he was attacked with spears by the hunters, Jethro, and the boys. The latter found that they were unable to drive their weapons through the thick skin, and betook themselves to their bows and arrows. The hunters, however, knew the points at which the skin was thinnest, and drove their spears deep into the animal just behind the foreleg, while the boys shot their arrows at its mouth. Another noose had been thrown over its head as it issued from the water, and the peasants pulling on the ropes prevented it from charging. 3 or 4 more thrusts were given from the hunters, then one of the spears touched a vital part. The hippopotamus sank on its knees and rolled over dead. The peasants sent up a shout of joy, for the flesh of the hippopotamus is by no means bad eating, and here was a store of food sufficient for the whole neighborhood.
"Shall we search for another, my lord?"
the hunter asked Chebron. "No, I think I have had enough of this. There is no fun in killing an animal that has not spirit to defend itself. What do you think, Amuba?" "I quite agree with you, Chebron. One might almost as well slaughter a cow. What is that?" he exclaimed suddenly as a loud scream was heard at a short distance away. "It is a woman's voice." Chebron darted off in full speed in the direction of the sound, closely followed by Amuba and Jethro. They ran about 100 yards along the bank when they saw the cause of the outcry. An immense crocodile was making his way toward the river, dragging along with it the figure of a woman. In spite of his reverence for the crocodile Chebron did not hesitate a moment, but rushing forward smote the crocodile on the nose with all his strength with the shaft of his spear. The crocodile dropped its victim and turned upon its assailant, but Jethro and Amuba were close behind, and these also attacked him. The crocodile, seeing this accession of enemies, now set out for the river, snapping its jaws together. "Mind its tail!" one of the hunters exclaimed, running up. But the warning was too late, for the next moment Amuba received a tremendous blow which sent him to the ground. The hunter at the same moment plunged his spear into the animal through the soft skin at the back of its leg. Jethro followed his example on the other side. The animal checked its flight, and turning round and round lashed with its tail in all directions. "Keep clear of it!" the hunter shouted. "It is mortally wounded and will need no more blows." In fact the crocodile had received its death wound. Its movements became more languid, it ceased to lash its tail, though it still snapped at those nearest to it, but gradually this